here we are once again on our biweekly call for the CIP delivery and planning group. And I know that the project team, Cello and Scott and Mike and John, have been working feverishly on the draft report. They were giving some updates on that. We'll get some updates on that later here in the meeting. And I know you all have been working on some draft reports on the initiatives you've been working on as well. So we'll have some time for that later. But actually this morning we're going to do like we've done in past meetings, except here on the front end, we're going to get a presentation and some conversation from Baltimore. So a couple of new folks are joining us to share what they've been doing in Baltimore on their CIP planning and delivery efforts. So we've got Yosef and Mohammed, and I'll let you guys introduce yourself. We've got about 30 minutes, and we keep this usually fairly informal. We'll kind of let you guys take the lead, and folks on this call usually aren't too shy, even though it's Monday morning, and for some on the West Coast, it's like 7:30 in the morning. But if you guys don't mind, we may jump in. We may raise a hand with some questions as we go along. And then we've got an agenda afterwards as time permits to give some updates on the case summary reports. And then we're planning for a workshop to share more broadly some presentations from various folks to share the initiatives, the improvement initiatives that we've been working on through this with the broader UAIM, soon to be WISE participants. So, Cello, any other introductory remarks before we turn it over to Mohammed and Yosef?
Just want to let know that Kathleen from DC Water is also joined the call.
Awesome. Awesome. So yeah, so we got a pretty good group here, and this group's been the folks on the call today for sure have been faithful in attending and participating in this effort. So yeah, so we got a good group, and we'll get this recorded as well so we could share more broadly. So with that, Yosef and Mohammed, go ahead and take it away, and we'll love to hear what you guys have going on.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you to this project team for the opportunity to come and talk to you guys. We've been participating in other streams or other working groups like the workforce development and change management. Various team members have been involved, but this is the first time that I've had a chance to meet with you guys. So I'm Yosef Kabed. I'm the acting bureau head for the Bureau of Water and Wastewater in the Department of Public Works, City of Baltimore. And then I'll let Mohammed Rahman introduce himself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mohammed Rahman. I'm the Chief Technical Officer for the Bureau of Water and Wastewater in the City of Baltimore.
Okay, so I'm going to share, Mohammed, if I have any technical issues, maybe you can share, but let me share my screen for the PowerPoint presentation. So we'll tag team it. I'll take the first half of the presentation, and then Mohammed will take the second half. If you guys could let me know if you see the screen.
Yes, we do.
Excellent. Okay. Everybody can see it. Great. Okay, so again, introduction. So what we wanted to do was, talk to you guys since you're part of the CIP delivery working group, share with you what Baltimore has been doing with regards to prioritization of CIP projects, utilizing the integrated planning framework. So quick agenda, provide a quick background on DPW, discuss the IPF and its adoption here in the city of Baltimore, and also how it's evolved over the years to the format or the framework that we currently have. And then near the end, I think you'll find it useful. We'll have a little demo using our current tool for IPF implementation. So The department as a whole is about 2,500 employees. As you can see, it's annual capital budget north of 360 million, and then also about $660 million in operating. There are there's the Bureau of Water Wastewater, and then there's a Bureau of Solid Waste. We provide all the solid waste services throughout the city of Baltimore. The Bureau of Water Wastewater delivers drinking water to about 1.8 million residents in the city, as well as surrounding counties, collection and treatment of wastewater through 2 large treatment facilities, as well as the operation and maintenance of all the buried infrastructure. That would be the water, the sewer, and the storm system. Through that, there are 3 separate enterprise funds for the Bureau of Water Wastewater. These are self-sustaining, ratepayer-funded pots of money that we use. The Solid Waste Bureau is funded out of a general fund, which is taxpayer-based, and that bureau competes for funding with all the other city agencies, general services, police, and so on and so forth. So the IPF, as you all know, there was a guidance that was released in 2012 for the integrated planning framework, and the concept behind it was to help municipalities more effectively, obviously, prioritize their capital projects in an effort to meet their obligations under the Clean Water Act. Various components of it, related to addressing human health and water quality challenges, evaluating and incorporating sustainable technologies, addressing community impact, and I think most critically would be to establish that the IPF was set up to establish a financial strategy. As many of you likely deal with, in the city of Baltimore, obviously there are competing needs, competing interests, and competing priorities on a regular basis. So having that framework to establish a sustainable financial strategy and include the input of stakeholders was the focus. Now, it focused mostly on stormwater, specifically on stormwater and wastewater, and we'll talk about how we've sort of adapted that approach. Trying to move to the next slide here. It's not. There we go. Okay. So the elements of that IPF, starting out with the baseline, what are the various issues as a municipality and as a utility that you deal with, as well as a description of your existing assets. And like many other municipalities, our buried infrastructure, 75 to 80 years to in some cases above 100 years old, that we have to juggle the priority for, and maintaining an effective and open channel of communication with our relevant stakeholders. That would be advocates, that would be community groups, that would be the city council, that would also be the planning commission. And a process for identifying, evaluating, and selecting the various alternatives and proposing implementation schedules, measuring success and improvements to the plan. So essentially, this is one of those plan, do, check, act sort of cycle, the PDCA cycle, where you can sort of substitute act with adjust. So in our case, this evaluation and prioritization is done on a yearly basis, and it's repeatable from year to year. Like I said, when it was first issued, the guidance for IPF, we were one of the first municipalities to implement it. It started out obviously with the triple bottom line approach, the economic, social, and environmental impacts, but we incorporated a fourth to have the quadruple bottom line approach. and then also expanded it beyond just the wastewater and stormwater that it was designed for to include water projects. And in our case, in addition to these linear assets on a yearly basis, we utilize the IPF to prioritize projects for facilities, our vertical assets, in addition to our linear assets. And so, from 2012, as I said, included water, modified it to include the quadruple bottom line. We have a consent decree with the EPA for the rehabilitation of our sanitary sewer assets. And so this consent decree was enacted in 2002 with an original completion year of 2016. Somewhere around the time that we implemented IPF, we actually used that as an effective and successfully used it as a negotiation tool with EPA to extend the deadline of our consent decree. And now we're utilizing a modified consent decree. And in so doing and using the IPF, what we communicated to the regulators was that the city of Baltimore, the socioeconomic challenges that segments of the population have, the pressure that puts on the utility to fund much needed projects goes beyond just the sewer assets. So we were able to communicate that and utilize the IPF and negotiate a new consent decree, which is the regime that we're under now. Now, along with that, around the same time frame between 2014 and 2015, we established an Office of Asset Management. We can talk about prioritization all we want, but at the end of the day, having an effective asset management program is very critical, and looking at from you're sort of moving along the continuum from corrective maintenance to preventive maintenance and eventually predictive maintenance was the vision behind that Office of Asset Management, which now works in concert with our capital project prioritization schemes, and allows us to be a little bit more to have a little bit more foresight. And prior to implementing the IPF later on in the years, as we introduced tools and new approaches, prior to that, project managers were not accustomed to asking the why, the why question with regards to their projects. And so now that we are moving along with a sort of a mature IPF, it forces project managers to be very circumspect in terms of how they plan their projects and how they justify and establish the rationale for funding. The newest components of the actually what I wanted to say was all of this in terms of the utilization of the IPF fits into our overall CIP budget development process, starting with the initial planning, and in the city, once those budgets are developed with the help of the IPF, the budget is submitted for fiscal review, the director's approval, and then there is a planning commission through which the public gets to weigh in on our prioritization, and after all of that is accomplished is when the council or the board of estimates would approve the annual the budget. So now to bring it all to the present, we have included an equity component to the IPF. And the way we look at equity is again, I mentioned the demographics in the city. Baltimore is known for having gone through some conditions in the past 50s, 60s, where redlining was a standard practice throughout the city, and so communities, primarily African American communities, had been marginalized through redlining practices, and so some of those the impacts continue to linger. So we look at equity in terms of how do we close some of those gaps in development based on race, gender, and various other demographic metrics. And so we have an Office of Equity and Environmental Justice that is within the Department of Public Works and reports directly to the director. And so through that office, we've been able to work collaboratively to include what we call an equity lens to the prioritization of CIP projects, and Mohammed will get into the details of how we actually accomplish that focus. Finally, before I hand it off to Mohammed, the important thing to realize is the tool that you will see as we demo it it's a tool. It's a tool for better decision making. It's not the end all by all, because at the end of the day, it's supposed to help us make better informed decisions, but not replace the actual decision making process. So it helps us to be even more strategic. And as I mentioned, there's a little bit of a culture change that we've had to sort of go through over the past few years in terms of getting project managers to be used to this IPF process in terms of promoting or justifying their projects. And it's also a cyclical process, and it's designed to be repeatable, it provides us a consistency in terms of how we justify projects to the Planning Commission and to the public at large. So with that, let me hand it off to Mohammed to get a little deeper into the IPF.
Thanks, Yusuf. Yusuf, will that be okay if I can share my screen so I can
Yes.
go into the demo as well? Let me share my screen.
Hey, Yusuf, while Mohammed is getting that set up, I'm just curious what is included in your quadruple bottom line. We've used that term, but I know some people use it differently.
Yes. So environmental, social, and economic are the original three, and then project implementation would be the fourth element.
Okay.
And Mohammed will, and I think Mohammed will actually get into that as he in his next slide.
Okay, super. Because yeah, I'm interested. What does that mean, project implementation? So yeah, I'll be very, very curious to hear that. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah. Thanks, Yusuf. So as Yusuf was talking about, like this tool is a process. I mean, we did kind of set up the framework, and we improve this framework every year. Like every year during the whole fiscal year, we look at the process, and then we make adjustments based on our like local requirements, state requirements, as well as federal requirements. Like few of the examples that I can give for the changes that we made on the framework was when we had a previous mayor, she had a policy about 5 pillars of the city. So she focused on 5 different things that she wanted to promote during her regime. So that was part of our IPF process, so that like we were making that as a priority, so that the mayor's 5 pillars were also part of the assessment. But then when the new administration came in, they had their own priorities as well. So every year, we starting July, we look at the process, and we then finalize the IPF framework. So once the IPF framework has been relooked and finalized, what we do is like we ask our project managers to kind of start making a business case. So so this is the time, like around like July to September, we ask the project managers to make a business case for their projects, and the amount of funding that they would need, the schedules of their projects, and all of that. Then all these projects or all the business cases are inputted into the GIS tool that we have, an online tool to kind of like it's like a repository where it not just stores the data, but also it is used to prioritize. Like we have our model on an online tool as well. So we did develop this online tool using different components, which we're going to go through in the presentation, like what are the things that we are looking at and all of that. So when the project managers are making a business case, they have to input a lot of data, like the location data, how would the project impact the communities. There are multiple questions, like Yusuf did say, like previously the managers were not making a case of why you need the project, but now they would have to, like, and with the equity lens, they also have to look at like how each project is impacting the neighborhoods. Previously, we used to only have like a performance lens, but now we have an equity lens as well that we introduced a couple of years ago. Based on all the input or the project business cases, we evaluate each project through these 4 different components. So this is what the quadruple bottom approach looks like. So we compare the project through and see its impacts on social elements, environmental elements, economic elements, like how is a project benefiting economically. And then the 4th component was the project implementation component. And then relooking through this evaluation criteria, we prioritize these projects using a performance lens as well as equity lens. So we look these projects from 2 different lenses. One is the performance lens and then the equity lens. And then we then combine those scores as well, and then we look the projects through combined lens and see how these projects are impacting for like the system performance itself, and then the equity portion as well. And then based on that, all the projects are ranked, and then these scores will allow the director, the fiscal folks, the bureau heads and the chiefs to make informed decisions which projects should move forward and which projects are very critical to the system and all of that. When I say in the criteria that in the prioritization method, we have a performance lens. So these are the criteria that we look at. Like for the environmental category, we have 3 different criteria that we look at. And then each criteria has a weight. So the 100% is the total for each project. Each project is weighed based on these criteria. So environmental category has 3 different criteria. Social has 6 different criteria. Economic, there are 2 different economic criteria and 4 different project implementation criteria. So every criteria has a score. Say, for example, if a project is a regulatory driven project, then based if there are multiple questions that each PM has to answer when they're making a business case, like this criteria will have questions like what kind of regulatory requirements do you have, and is your project kind of has a deadline and stuff like that, or is it eliminating any SSOs? And the project, does the project area has history of SSOs and all of that. So there are multiple questions that each PM would answer as part of the business case process, and then based on their responses, they're scored, or each project is allocated a score based on this criteria weights. So environmental projects does kind of has a lot of impact. So we have much of the score assigned to the environmental projects because mostly environmental and social, because of the health reason and improving quality of life and all of that. If I go to next slide, so this is the equity lens, how we look at the projects and evaluate the projects in terms of equity. So those are the same criteria. It's the same categories we have, like it's a quadruple bottom, 4 different components, and the same criteria as before. But then when it comes to equity, we look at like what is the equity potential for each criteria. Like if a project is regulatory driven, it might score high on the performance lens, but how is it impacting equity? Like, how is that helpful to equity? And then we based on the potential equity potential, we defined how much score should each criteria be assigned for each project. Like, say, for example, if a project is a regulatory driven project, and if it falls under a environmental justice zone, then they might get 17% in performance lens, but in the equity lens, they might only get 5% because the equity potential for a regulatory driven project is low. However, if a project is eliminating a sewage overflow, it's a high equity potential because it's going to improve the health, and especially if it falls in an environmental justice zone where you have a lot of people who are poor, or there is a lot of minority population, then you get high score. So when it comes to equity lens, these are the different scores that we have assigned based on the vital signs that we have seen in the city of Baltimore. So the highest score goes to a project that impacts health and safety in an environmental justice zone. So all these calculations and prioritizations are GIS based. So we have set different maps based on the vital signs and all of that, and we can get into it. And as we know, like, not every criteria is applicable for all the utilities. Some of them do and some of them don't. So these are the different utilities that we have, or different enterprise funds that we have, that each project would compete in, and these are the criteria. So like some of the drinking water quality, potable water leakage, it only applies for water, so it doesn't apply for wastewater projects. So when a project manager is making a business case, they don't have to answer the questions for these criteria, and they won't be scored for that. And that's consistent across the enterprise. Like if a project is, all the wastewater projects would compete together, so all the wastewater projects won't have those scoring. So the selection process itself, when it, like I said earlier, like we have an online tool. Like previously, I mean, like the process has come a long way from where we started. Like in the beginning, we were making a business case in an Excel sheet. That's how we started, and we had very few items, and it wasn't as sophisticated as it is today. So we used to do. We used to kind of have this prioritization done on a software, but now this year we went kind of like much advanced by including the GIS maps, so it's accurate to the point. Like so like it the tool itself would import the project area, and it would compare with different databases, GIS databases, related to environmental justice zones, air quality, population, like income-based maps and all of that, and then it evaluates the score based on a GIS comparison. So based on the tool itself, which I'm gonna like soon give a demo on, is like the project managers have to kind of draw a project boundary, and then they have to answer some questions, like enter the project information, and then the model would calculate or prioritize this. So it will do an assessment on population impacted, establish the need, and then the supporting data, like it kind of compares, and then it assigns the scores. So once the scores are assigned for each project, the model will also you know, split out the scores for performance lens, equity lens, and the combined lens. And then based on that, projects can be scored and ranked. So you can see every fiscal year we have a ranking of projects, how each project scored, how much money they would need, and we can see that in the demo. So I can maybe
Mohammed,
let me just
Mohammed, if I could interrupt, I think Scott has his hand up.
Okay.
Yeah, just a curiosity. So it's an annual process, I take it, that you're going through the way you've described it and linking it to your budget and everything. Do you
Yes.
take existing projects that have already been through this process and update them if they're, let's say, in the preliminary engineering or design phase, that kind of thing?
So yeah, so there is one question which says like if the project is ongoing or if the project is a new project. So it does has questions related to that as well. And then say, for example, there is an existing project that's in design stage and now they're requesting funding for construction. But maybe they might score low in the project, but then when we make a decision, the administration team can make a decision based on all the information that they have, based on the schedule, based on the project prioritization and all of that. So like Yusuf mentioned, like this is just a tool for us to make decisions. Like it's not giving out the list of projects that you need to move forward with. It is a tool where you can compare each project and rank them based on certain criteria. Like you can rank them based on performance criteria, you can rank them based on equity lens, you can rank them based on combined lens and make an informed decision which project should move forward. You know what I mean? So it's like a justification on why you are moving ahead with funding certain projects and why you're not funding certain projects. So
said another way, it's not a black box that spits out an answer that we just blindly follow. We use those the results of the prioritization and then just kind of base the decisions, make our decisions based on those results. But it's not the end. It's not the end of the road when it comes to the decision-making process.
Sure, and in that decision-making process, are you, and from a budget standpoint or a project authorization standpoint, are you doing it by major phase of the project, or are you doing it for the total project? Just a quick answer is fine because you have more to present here.
So yeah, that will be based on, like I said, like traditionally what we do is like if a project is ongoing, we don't try to stop it. We try to fund those projects that we have already agreed in a previous fiscal years. So if certain additional funding is required, we traditionally don't try to stop it because it doesn't make sense to unfund or not fund a project that we have already started.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So this is our equity prioritization online tool that we have. We have used our project management team, AECOM, or program management team for the consent decree to work or help us with creating an online tool, which used to be initially it used to be an Excel sheet. And then we used to manually rank it, but now because of the GIS component, we kind of had to integrate it online. So this tool is pulling all the information from the backend. So what each project managers would have to go through is the process. Like, so say for example, if I am a project manager, I would just go in and this is how I initiate a project funding. This is how I make a business case. So the first step would be I would have to kind of like upload a shapefile so that like it's uploaded onto the map. Like say for example, if I don't have a GIS, then what I can simply do is like I can say if it's a pump station and the pump station is located here, I can use the tool up here and then just draw the project boundary. I mean, sometimes there are different questions that would come through. I think the two. Hold on. So like one of them is just the project location. The other one is the project impact location. So like there might be a small pumping station, but then the impact area would be much bit larger. For utilities, you'll have multiple project areas. Then you can select all of those, and then the system will take it as your project impact area. So or you can just upload it using a GIS file and then go from there. And then all you have to do is like initiate a project. Yeah, let me put some sample project. Okay, finish drawing. And then you have to go through multiple questions where that project is, who is the project manager, what sewer shed it is, and then provide some justification if it's a large scale, small scale, the schedule, expenditure. So you have to fill in all this information. And then these are the questions that are asked for the performance lens. So this is the project information. So if a project is what you call consent decree, or is there any federal requirements like MS4 permit or a state permit that a project is being implemented because of a permit requirement or stuff like that, you score them based on that, and then you provide the justification why that is correct. Like say, for example, if I have a consent decree project, then I would score 10, and then I would say this is a part of modified consent decree, and we are required to do it. So and forth. Like each PM has to go through these multiple questionnaire, and then it's the same criteria that I mentioned in the presentation. The regulatory events, SSOs, they have multiple questions. Each criteria has multiple questions. And then once you go through the performance questions, then comes the equity questionnaire. So you have to go through a similar questionnaire and make a business case why your project, like give information on project area, how the project is impacting economically, socially, environmentally. And then you fill in all this information, and then you submit the form, submit your project eventually. Like once you have all of this, you'll review it, and then you'll submit it. So once like all the PMs have submitted the projects, you can run an evaluation, and you can do a project prioritization every year. So let me run the sequence so that you guys can see how we make decisions based on the performance lens and equity lens. So these are the projects that were submitted last year. There are 42 projects. I might have added some of them as a what do you call during like the demo itself, and then some of them before. I think, but last year we had 38 projects. So based on the questions that were answered, the model would kind of show how each project scores. Like these are the performance scores, these are the equity scores, and these are the combined scores, and these are the costs. So, and then you can compare each project as well to see how did that project score in each criteria. So for the environmental, these projects scored high. And then for equity lens, E2 and E3 were high. That means like this project was scored high in economic benefits provided to the community under environmental justice zone. And then you can look at each combined lens and see how the project performed, like when you combine performance lens and the performance score as well as equity score. And then we make decisions based on which projects you want to approve, which projects you want to fund. You'll have a clear justification on why you are promoting each project. Any questions so far?
Mohammed, I have a quick question. It looks very cool. Thank you for sharing. My question is how much like data quality review do you have to do? Like after people submit their scores, do you like as a committee be like, oh, this person is like way biased, or how do you sort of balance the scores?
So that's a good question. So once a PM inputs the data, it goes through approval process. So it's not like once the PM submits the data online, it doesn't go to fiscal review directly. So it goes through a section chief review, then the division chief review, then the bureau head review, and then it goes to the fiscal review. So before we go to before we take all these projects to the director for approval, We usually have conference. We call it as a budget conference. And it's an internal conference that we do, where all the stakeholders, all the PMs, the bureau head, chief, everybody meets. They discuss about the projects, project scores, and all of that as well. So it goes through a sequence of approvals before we even finalize those scores and take it to the director for approval.
Okay, thanks.
So going back to the presentation, I got like a couple of more slides and then I'll end it. So you guys might have seen, like, this is how each, like the 3 different lenses are, how performance lens, equity lens, and combined lens are scored. To kind of just give a summary, the other things that we could do cool with the tool is like, it gives you a summary on the whole program summary as well. Like it tells you how many projects we submitted and how many projects were citywide project, what was the total cost, what was the average equity score for all the projects for this fiscal year. And so all these scores are on a scale of 0 to 10. Let me go back to the. So if you see, there's like, these are all score. Each project is scored on a scale of 0 to 10. So then we can also kind of see what is the overall equity for projects. And then we can also show how the projects are located, all the projects. And then we can show them which ones are the service impact areas and all of that. And then we can also kind of like show that on a map for just for equity, how the equity scores are for the projects that are being selected for each fiscal year. And then it splits out some data for that, so that people can see how these projects are impacting in terms of equity. So it gives some analytics out of all of that. And if you have any further questions about the tool itself, or how did we finalize certain criteria or something like that, you can always email me or Yusuf. Our email IDs are up there.
I think there's one question.
I've got a question. Hi, this is Jeff Carmichael from Metro Vancouver. I'm interested in knowing a little bit more about the equity component. Is that just a localized version of the fuller spectrum? Or because when I hear social impacts, I think partially that reflects equity. So when I see a separate lens called equity, I'm trying to figure out how that connects in.
So so we have a vital signs report that city has worked with the local organizations to kind of develop different criterias of how equity is impacted when you look at different sub-criterias, like when it comes to income, how are they spread out, like how is the city spread out when it comes to income, and when it comes to minority, when it comes to health, and all of that. So we have used those maps in the back end, and like I said, like in some of those questionnaires, let me share the memo so that we can kind of go a little, or do a little deeper dive on how we look at the criteria itself. Like when it comes to equity lens, I mean, when it comes to performance lens, it's straightforward. Like if a project is impacting SSO, or if it has any health benefits, then it gets a straight score. But then when it comes to equity, it's a little bit, more sophisticated, because you're comparing it with what you call different GIS databases based on how it's impacting. Like say, for example, for the environmental, one of the first question, N1A, is it's under regulatory driven projects, even though this criteria is low on equity, but then this is the question that they would ask, like population living in equity zone impacted by the project area as a share of total population impacted by the project. And then for sewer overflows, you're comparing the frequency of sewer overflows in environmental zone, justice zone, And we have the data from last 3 years on, there's actually a heat map that we have in GIS where we had all the SSOs in last 3 years, and then we compared that with the project location, and then we see how much this project is impacting in reducing or the SSOs and where does it actually fall. If it's eliminating a area where there are a lot of SSOs, then it gets scored higher. So we look at the frequency. Yeah, go ahead.
What maybe just to add to that, Jeff, one of the databases that we access for the equity portion is if you look at social, it's got health and safety, drinking water service, that's drinking water quality. These are the indicators that impact just any any generic community. But when we look at equity and when we look to use the equity lens, for instance, we look at a database called the Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance, or BINIA, and it's a organization that has kept demographic, income, racial disparity data for several years specific to Baltimore, and so that allows us to sort of append the other indicators onto existing database on these types of demographics to help us see it through the equity lens.
So it does sound, thanks, that's really helpful. So it does sound like it's more of a localized lens on the impacts of a project. Great. Okay, thank you.
Like some of them, we have also used the environmental justice screen, the data from EPA as well. So for the health and safety, we've used some of the technical maps from the EPA. EPA has like data on what areas have what kind of pollution and all of that. So we pulled some information from EPA's website as well for environmental justice screen.
Oh, really interesting. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
All right, looks like we've got a couple more questions. Scott.
Yeah, just nice presentation, and just an observation is I really am impressed by the fact that you're using those performance evaluation, those performance measures, the metrics, in the different aspects that you're ranking, and I assume that you're trying to monitor whether the projects actually accomplish those things. But what my other question is, this group has also been dealing with business case evaluations, and where you're dealing with, let's just call it costs and benefits and that kind of thing. So and risk as kind of a criteria. Also, if you want to interpret it that way, just curious if you're incorporating either business case evaluations or risk in your data.
So we are doing a cost benefit analysis because like some of the questionnaires are related to that. Like say when it comes to SSOs, if a project is impacting or eliminating an SSO, once the project is done, that SSO is eliminated. So there is a straight relation to a project being implemented, and you see the benefit of it right after that. There are certain things which we are trying to kind of also identify and track them on a long-term basis, like things like health, like the overall health of the population in the area. Like by implementing these projects, so these reports are updated every year, right? So these vital sign reports are updated on annual or every 2-3 years. So we are observing that to see how these projects are impacting health, how it's impacting the quality of life, cost of living, the medical expenses, like things like that. So we have not established a long-term cost benefit for these projects, but we do have the short-term, the immediate benefits that these projects would impact on the neighborhoods.
Thank you.
All right, Kathleen.
So, Mohammed Youssef, awesome presentation. This looks like really interesting. There's so many things that I like about it. Quick question on the equity lens. You had a column in there where you had a type where it was structural or distributional. Can you talk a little bit about what that means?
Yeah, sure. Let me share that. This one, right? Like when it comes to like the utilities, so these are mostly a question that would impact a utility, like a wastewater utility. The type of equity, this is like mostly related to, I believe, the type of equity that you have based on how you're scoring and what kind of map you're taking. And like one of the things that I did mention was like there are certain projects that are located in a certain area, but then it has a huge impact area, like a pump station. It might be located in one area, but then it impacts a larger community, what do you call, it might affect like a major area. And there are some projects which are what do you call, citywide. The equity is based on that. The type of equity is based on whether it's distributional or structural. Let me kind of go deeper in that too. And then I think like we do define in the memo what each of them means. Because some of these data that came from equity, like the Office of Equity, so we follow their guidelines, like how they are defining that. But I can get back to you on that. And then,
Kathleen,
yeah.
were you referring to the equity potential, the low, medium, high within equity?
The type of equity that we define in the memo that says distributional or structural, or procedural. So these are the instructions that we get on like how the equity committee is defining each equity to be. But I can get back to you with a specific answer on that.
Thanks. And so the Office of Equity, this is something that's coming straight from the city. It sets these
so yeah, some of the policies, yes, like how do they define an equity, like what kind of equity that is. And then I mean, we're looking at the technical perspective on the impact areas and all of that, but then how you define each equity component and all of that is coming from the equity office.
And that office,
have a chief.
Sorry to cut you off, Mohammed. Yeah, exactly. I was going to say it's within DPW. We're one of the first, if not the first, agency to have an equity office embedded. Now, moving forward with the new administration, it is likely that they will have a citywide equity office that will come under. But that's yet to be.
So you guys are definitely trailblazers. Awesome.
I believe so. Within the city for sure. Within the city for sure. And so Mohammed and others have done a great job in terms of shepherding this whole IPF process through, and so as you see, we're refining it and improving it as we go along.
Very impressive.
Awesome, guys. I'm going to give you the round of applause right there. So Yosef and Mohammed, thank you so much for jumping in today. If you guys have time and folks want to stay on for a few extra minutes, that's awesome, but we're getting right at 10:30. So just wanted to let everybody else know, hey, if you need to jump off, go ahead. But guys, thank you so much for the presentation today. I'm going to follow back up with the project team, and I'll be getting back to several of you about our workshop that we're planning on April 26th and May 10th. So just be looking for some more emails on that. So, all right.
And
so
Zonetta,
thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Zonetta, any comments? I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, just real quick, if they have time for just one more additional question. I think you did a fantastic job. You are the trailblazer. Our community just implemented an equity and inclusion in terms of how we distribute capital projects in terms of contractors, M&W, minority and women-owned enterprises. Do you all have that embedded as well? Are you all tracking that in terms?
When it comes to planning and funding the project itself, we don't, because that component comes during implementation.
Implementation.
But then we have a office of minority and women-based compliance, like we call it as MW office, which sets the goal on each project. So every project that is funded, so this the set goal for each project for a construction project is different than a design project.
Yeah.
Design projects, the set goals are 20% for MBE and 15% for WBE. Sorry, it's 30% for MBE and 15% for WBE. But then if you're doing any technical projects where you don't have those many contractors or consultants in the city who can do that kind of work, or if it's a special projects, then you can request for a waiver and you can have reduced goals. But traditionally, when it comes to implementation, MW office sets the goals and they also kind of look at the compliance portion as well to see if we are meeting the goals or if we are not meeting the goals.
Okay. Well, thank you so very much. I'll probably try to get in touch with you guys to see if you kind of help our executive director with that. He's co-leading that for Louisville. So thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely. We'd be glad to engage and help any way we can.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, and Yusuf and Mohammed, I'll shoot you a note, but would love to get a PDF of the slides, and we'll send out the slides along with the recording out to this group so that folks have a chance to look at that. Because I definitely want to share that with a couple of our leadership folks as well.